Have you ever met someone who believed that saving every single penny was more important than living with honesty? This is the story of an old man who spent his entire life chasing money, but almost lost the one thing that truly mattered: his character. His name was Walter. Walter was 72 years old. He lived alone in a tiny, weathered house at the edge of a quiet farming town somewhere in the American Midwest. The house looked forgotten by time. Its white paint had faded years ago, the porch leaned slightly to one side, and the wooden fence surrounding the yard had several broken pieces that Walter never bothered to fix. People often wondered why he lived that way. It wasn't because he was poor. In fact, Walter had more money hidden inside his house than anyone could imagine. Every dollar he earned, every coin he found, every penny he managed to save went into old metal boxes buried beneath loose floorboards in his bedroom. He counted that money almost every night before going to sleep. The strange thing was, he never spent it. His refrigerator was nearly empty. His clothes were over 20 years old. His shoes had holes in the soles. The heater barely worked during freezing winters because Walter refused to pay for repairs. "If I spend money today," he always whispered to himself, "I'll have less tomorrow." Saving money had become more than a habit. It had become an obsession. Walter had no wife, no children, no brothers or sisters who still visited him. Years earlier, his wife had passed away after a long illness. They had once dreamed of traveling across America together after retirement. But Walter had refused to spend money on vacations. "There will always be another year," he had told her. That year never came. After she died, silence became the only companion inside his home. At first, neighbors tried checking on him. Mrs. Carter from across the road baked fresh apple pies every Sunday. Sometimes she knocked on Walter's door. "I made too much pie again," she would smile. "Would you like a slice?" Walter never smiled back. "No, thank you." He always closed the door before she could say another word. Children riding bicycles through the neighborhood waved at him. He never waved back. People eventually stopped trying. The town slowly accepted that Walter simply wanted to be left alone. Every morning before sunrise, Walter followed the exact same routine. He woke up at 5, drank a cup of plain black coffee without sugar, ate half a slice of stale bread. Then he walked through town carrying an old cloth bag over his shoulder. Everyone assumed he was going shopping. He wasn't. Walter hated spending money at grocery stores. Instead, he searched for opportunities. If someone dropped a coin on the sidewalk, Walter noticed it before anyone else. If a fruit rolled off a market stand unnoticed, Walter quietly slipped it into his bag. If an empty soda can could be recycled for a few cents, he collected it. To him, every penny mattered. Every dollar saved felt like a victory. But slowly, saving money was no longer enough. His greed kept growing. One evening, while walking home, Walter passed a large cornfield owned by a hard-working farmer named Jacob. Golden corn stretched across the land as the evening sun painted the sky orange. Walter stopped walking. He looked around. No one was there. He quietly stepped over the fence. At first, he only picked 2 ears of corn. "Jacob has thousands," he told himself. "He'll never notice 2. He hurried home. That night, as he boiled the corn for dinner, he smiled. Not because it tasted good, because it hadn't cost him anything. The next week, he returned. This time he took 6, then 10. Soon, stealing from the field became part of his weekly routine. Whenever Walter wanted vegetables, he simply visited someone else's farm. He convinced himself it wasn't stealing. "They have more than enough," he whispered. "I'm just taking a little." But little things have a way of becoming bigger. Before long, Walter wasn't just taking vegetables. He began sneaking into orchards after sunset. He filled his bag with apples, peaches, pears, whatever he could find. He even stole fresh eggs from small backyard chicken coops. Every time he got away with it, his confidence grew stronger. His hidden savings continued growing. His conscience grew weaker. The townspeople started noticing strange things. Mrs. Wilson couldn't understand why several tomatoes disappeared every few nights. Mr. Harris counted fewer pumpkins than he remembered planting. Jacob noticed missing rows of corn. At first, everyone blamed wild animals. Then they blamed hungry teenagers. Nobody suspected the quiet old man who barely spoke to anyone. Walter listened to their conversations from a distance. Inside, he felt nervous. But when nobody accused him, he convinced himself everything was fine. If they can't prove anything, he thought, then no one gets hurt. One cold autumn evening, Walter sat alone inside his dark kitchen eating stolen potatoes cooked over a tiny stove. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Wind howled outside. He reached into one of his hidden metal boxes and began counting stacks of dollar bills. 500, 1,000, 5,000, $10,000. His hands trembled with excitement. He smiled. Yet something felt strange. The house remained silent. No laughter. No family. No friends. Only the sound of money being counted over and over again. Walter looked around the empty room. For just a second, he wondered whether all that money had really made him rich, or whether it had quietly stolen something much more valuable from him. He quickly pushed the thought away. Money was all that mattered. At least, that's what he still believed. Little did Walter know, the biggest lesson of his life was about to arrive in the most unexpected way imaginable. The following morning began like countless others. The cold wind drifted through the quiet streets as Walter stepped outside with his worn-out cloth bag hanging from his shoulder. The town was just beginning to wake up. Bakery ovens filled the air with the smell of fresh bread. Farmers started their tractors, and children waited for school buses with sleepy eyes. Walter ignored them all. He wasn't thinking about breakfast. He wasn't thinking about the weather. He was thinking about what he could take without spending a single dollar. As he walked past Jacob's farm once again, he noticed something different. Fresh vegetables filled wooden baskets near the barn. Tomatoes, carrots, green beans, fresh lettuce. Jacob had harvested everything the evening before. Walter looked around carefully. No one was outside. He slowly climbed over the fence and hurried toward the baskets. "Just enough for a few days," he whispered. "No one will even notice." He filled his cloth bag as quickly as he could. Just as he turned to leave, a loud bark shattered the silence. Jacob's old farm dog, Duke, came running across the field. Walter froze. His heart pounded against his chest. Duke wasn't attacking. He simply barked over and over, loud enough for someone inside the farmhouse to hear. Within seconds, the front door swung open. Jacob stepped outside. "Walter?" The old man's face instantly turned pale. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. Walter slowly lowered his eyes. His bag, filled with fresh vegetables, rested heavily in his trembling hands. Jacob walked closer. His expression wasn't angry. It was disappointed. "I've been wondering for weeks who kept taking food from my farm," Jacob said quietly. "I never imagined it was you." Walter couldn't find the courage to answer. Instead, he tightened his grip on the bag. Jacob sighed. "If you were hungry, all you had to do was ask." Those simple words struck Walter harder than any punishment ever could. Ask? He hadn't asked anyone for help in years. His pride had always been stronger than his honesty. Without saying another word, Walter hurried away. Jacob didn't stop him. He simply watched the lonely old man disappear down the dirt road. That afternoon, Walter locked himself inside his house. He placed the stolen vegetables on the kitchen table. For the first time, he couldn't eat them. Jacob's words echoed endlessly inside his mind. If you were hungry, all you had to do was ask. Walter stared at the old wooden table where he used to eat dinner with his wife decades earlier. Suddenly, memories came flooding back. He remembered her gentle smile, her kindness, the way she always insisted on helping neighbors whenever they needed anything. She used to tell him, "Kindness always comes back to us." Walter had laughed at those words. He believed money came back, not kindness. Now, sitting alone in complete silence, he wasn't so sure anymore. That evening, heavy rain began pouring across the town. Lightning flashed across the dark sky. Thunder shook Walter's tiny house. As he prepared for bed, he heard something unusual, a faint cry. At first he ignored it. Then he heard it again. A small, frightened voice calling for help. Walter opened his front door. Across the muddy road stood a little girl, no older than 8 years old. She was completely soaked by the rain. Tears rolled down her face. "My puppy!" she cried. "I can't find my puppy." Walter looked away. Normally, he would have closed the door without saying a word. Helping someone meant spending time, and Walter believed time was almost as valuable as money. But something inside him hesitated. For reasons he couldn't explain, he couldn't close the door. Instead, he quietly grabbed an old flashlight. "Which way did he run?" he asked. The little girl's face brightened. "I think he went toward the woods." For nearly an hour, they searched together through rain, mud, and darkness. Walter's old knees ached with every step. His clothes became soaked, his shoes filled with water. Finally, from beneath a fallen tree came a tiny whimper. The frightened puppy was trapped between thick branches. Walter carefully lifted the heavy wood, despite the pain shooting through his back. The puppy jumped free and ran straight into the little girl's arms. She hugged him tightly before looking up at Walter. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved him." Then she surprised Walter even more. She wrapped her tiny arms around him. It had been years, perhaps decades, since anyone had hugged him. Walter stood completely still. He didn't know what to do. The little girl smiled. "My mom always says good people help others." Good people. Those two words stayed with Walter long after the girl disappeared into the rainy night. Back inside his empty house, Walter looked at himself in the mirror. Rainwater dripped from his gray hair. Mud covered his clothes. Yet something inside him felt strangely warm. Helping that little girl had cost him nothing, but somehow, it felt more valuable than counting $10,000 hidden beneath his floor. Still, old habits don't disappear overnight. The next morning, Walter opened one of his metal boxes filled with cash. He ran his fingers across the stacks of bills. The familiar excitement returned. Maybe yesterday meant nothing. Maybe kindness was just a temporary feeling. Maybe money was still all that mattered. Or so he tried to convince himself. But deep inside, the first crack had finally appeared in the wall he had spent a lifetime building around his heart. And very soon, that wall would come crashing down. The days passed, but Walter could no longer escape his own thoughts. Every time he looked at the vegetables in his kitchen, he remembered Jacob's disappointed face. Every time he opened one of the metal boxes hidden beneath his bedroom floor, he remembered the little girl's words. "My mom always says good people help others." Those simple sentences echoed inside his mind day and night. For the first time in years, counting money no longer brought him peace. Instead, it reminded him of everything he had lost. One chilly morning, Walter woke up feeling unusually weak. His body ached, his hands trembled. Even standing up from his bed felt difficult. He walked toward the kitchen, hoping a cup of coffee would make him feel better. But halfway there, his vision blurred. The room spun around him. Suddenly, Walter collapsed onto the wooden floor. The old house became silent once again. Hours passed. No one knocked on his door. No one called his name. No one even knew he was lying there. Walter slowly opened his eyes. Pain shot through his back as he struggled to sit up. His breathing was heavy. He realized something terrifying. If he had died that morning, it might have taken days before anyone found him. Not because people were cruel, but because he had spent years pushing everyone away. For the first time in his life, Walter understood the true cost of loneliness. Money had filled his boxes, but it had emptied his life. Later that afternoon, after gathering enough strength, Walter walked into town. His steps were slower than ever. People noticed him, but no one stopped to talk. Not because they hated him, they simply assumed he preferred to be alone. That was the image he had created over so many years. As Walter passed the town square, he saw several volunteers loading boxes of food into a truck. A large sign read, "Community Food Drive for Families in Need." Children laughed while carrying canned food. Teenagers stacked blankets. Older neighbors packed fresh vegetables donated by local farmers. And standing near the truck was Jacob, the very man Walter had stolen from. Jacob noticed Walter watching from a distance. He smiled warmly. "Morning, Walter." Walter lowered his head. I don't think I deserve your kindness." Jacob walked closer. "We all make mistakes." Walter swallowed hard. "You don't understand. I've stolen from you for months. I stole from other farms too. I even took food from people's gardens." His voice began shaking. "I wasn't starving. I just didn't want to spend my own money." The words felt heavier with every sentence. Jacob remained silent. Finally, he spoke. "I already knew." Walter looked up in shock. "You knew?" Jacob nodded. "I figured it out after that morning. But I wanted to believe you'd find your own way." Walter's eyes filled with tears. "Aren't you angry?" Jacob smiled gently. "Being angry won't change yesterday. But choosing to do what's right can change tomorrow." Those words broke something inside Walter. For years, he had convinced himself that people would hate him if they ever discovered the truth. Instead, the first person to learn everything had chosen forgiveness. Walter could no longer hold back his emotions. Tears streamed down his weathered face. "I've wasted my whole life." Jacob placed a hand on Walter's shoulder. "No. You still have today." That evening, Walter returned home with a heavy heart. He entered his bedroom and pulled up the loose wooden floorboards. One by one, he removed every metal box. The room filled with stacks of cash he had spent decades protecting. He stared at the money for a long time. Thousands of dollars. Years of sacrifice. Years of greed. Years of loneliness. Then he whispered to himself, "What good is all this? if I can't even respect the man I see in the mirror? The next morning, the entire town was surprised. Walter walked straight to Jacob's farm carrying one of the heavy metal boxes. Inside was every dollar he believed he owed. Jacob looked confused. "What is this?" Walter set the box on the porch. "It's not enough to repay what I stole, but it's where I have to begin." Jacob slowly closed the lid. "I don't want your money." Walter looked stunned. "I want something else." "What?" Jacob smiled. "Your honesty and your hard work." Walter stood speechless. For years he had searched for the easiest path. Now, someone was offering him something much harder, a chance to earn back his dignity. Jacob handed him an old pair of work gloves. "We start tomorrow morning." Walter looked down at the gloves in his hands. His fingers trembled. They were rough, worn, covered with years of honest labor. He had avoided work his entire life whenever possible. Now those gloves felt heavier than the box of money he had carried. For the first time, Walter wasn't afraid of hard work. He was afraid of wasting another day living the wrong way. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the fields, Walter looked across the endless rows of crops glowing beneath the orange sky. Tomorrow, his life would begin again. Not as a thief, not as a lonely old man hiding behind piles of money, but as someone ready to earn every meal with honesty. And that decision would change not only his own life, but the hearts of everyone around him. The next morning, long before the sun rose over the quiet fields, Walter stood outside Jacob's farmhouse. The air was cold. A gentle mist floated above the ground. For years, Walter had watched hardworking people begin their day before sunrise. He used to think they were wasting their lives. Now, he was one of them. Jacob handed Walter a shovel and smiled. "Ready?" Walter looked at his old hands. They had spent years counting money. Today, they would finally earn it. The first few hours were harder than anything Walter had ever experienced. His back hurt. His knees ached. His hands quickly developed painful blisters. Every step through the muddy fields felt heavier than the last. Several times Walter wanted to quit. The old version of himself whispered, "Go home. You have enough money. You don't need this." But another voice, a stronger voice, answered back. No amount of money can buy back a wasted life. So he kept working, day after day, week after week. Slowly, something incredible began to happen. The same neighbors who once avoided Walter started greeting him every morning. "Good morning, Walter. Need a hand with those boxes? You're doing a great job." At first, Walter didn't know how to respond. No one had spoken to him with kindness in years. Then one morning, Mrs. Carter, the woman whose homemade pie he had rejected so many times, walked toward him carrying a warm basket. "I baked another apple pie," she said with a smile. "This time, you're not allowed to say no." Walter laughed. It was a quiet laugh, but it was real. He accepted the pie with trembling hands. "Thank you," he whispered. Those two simple words felt unfamiliar. He realized he had spent years refusing generosity because accepting kindness felt like weakness. Now he understood. Kindness was one of the greatest strengths a person could ever receive. As the months passed, Walter became one of the hardest working men on Jacob's farm. Despite his age, he never complained. He arrived before everyone else. He stayed until every job was finished. Whenever new workers became tired, Walter encouraged them. "I know it's difficult," he would say, "but honest work lets you sleep with a peaceful heart." People were surprised. The lonely old man who once stole food had become someone others respected. But Walter wasn't finished changing. One evening, he carried every metal box from beneath his bedroom floor into the middle of his living room. He opened each one. Thousands of dollars lay before him. For years, those boxes had been his treasure. Now, they looked like chains. The following morning, Walter walked to the town hall. The mayor looked shocked as Walter placed every box on the desk. "I'd like to make a donation," Walter said. The mayor blinked in disbelief. "This is all of it?" Walter nodded. "I spent my whole life saving money I never used. If it can help someone else build a better life, then that's where it belongs." The town used Walter's savings to repair the local playground. They helped struggling families buy groceries. They purchased books for the public library. They repaired the roof of the community center. Walter watched children laugh on the new playground. He smiled quietly. That sound was worth far more than anything hidden beneath his bedroom floor had ever been. Months later, the little girl whose puppy Walter had rescued saw him working near the park. She ran toward him with the same joyful smile. "Mr. Walter," she hugged him tightly. "My puppy remembers you." The little dog happily wagged its tail and jumped into Walter's arms. Walter laughed again. A real laugh, the kind that comes from a peaceful heart. That evening, Jacob sat beside Walter on the farmhouse porch as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the fields. "You've changed," Jacob said. Walter looked across the golden farmland. "No," he replied softly. "I finally became the man I should have been all along." Jacob smiled. "So tell me, are you richer now than when you had all those boxes of cash?" Walter looked at his rough hands. The blisters had become calluses. His clothes were still simple. His house was still small. But his heart had never felt so full. He smiled. "I used to own money. But now, I have friends. I have respect. I have peace. And for the first time in my life, I have earned my own dinner." A gentle breeze moved through the fields. Birds sang in the distance. Walter closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his late wife. He remembered the words she had spoken so many years ago. "Kindness always comes back to us." She had been right all along. Years passed. Whenever young people in town complained that honest work was too difficult, Jacob would simply point toward Walter. The old man would smile and say, "Stealing may fill your stomach for a day. Saving every dollar may fill a box. But only honesty can fill a life." And every person who heard his story left with the same lesson. Because true wealth is never measured by the money hidden in your home. It is measured by the trust people place in your name, the kindness you show to strangers, the work you do with honest hands, and the peace you feel when you close your eyes at the end of the day. Walter once believed that spending less made him rich. In the end, he discovered that giving more, working harder, and living honestly made him the richest man in town. Moral: money saved through dishonesty will never bring lasting happiness. True wealth comes from honest work, kindness, integrity, and the respect you earn from others. If you learned something from this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with others.